Greetings, Crusaders! My name is DragonFear999, and today, oh boy, today, do I have something special. This is the start of something new, something a little bit interesting, something that I have to give a big shout out to one of my members of chat over on Twitch for us here. She came up with this little neat idea that I kind of want to try out. See how it works. See what works and see what doesn't. So she had the idea of doing this little thing for us where we would do something called Crusader Reading Day, where we are going to read some short stories. Now, the deal with this is it can be short stories, it can be maybe D&D stories, or maybe it's just stories you want to tell and get off your chest. And if you want to, feel free to give us some more stories to read out, please, feel free. Leave a message down in the comments if you have some stories that you want to tell, and come join our Discord server to put some suggestions in. I think it'd be really fun. It's going to be an awesome little time, but other than that, I think we're going to get right into our first short story here. And for today, we have 3 short stories by the one who suggested this, first of all, to start off the week. And we're going to give this a shot and see how it goes. So without further ado, let's get into the first one, shall we? So our first short story comes today, and it is called Found Family by Claire DeMarcy. And if I can find it later, I will try and leave links to these stories as well, so if anybody else wants to read them on their own, they can. And send some support over to the creator of these stories, please. Please do. That'd be much appreciated. But other than that, let's get into it, shall we? Hitting the road was never easy for most dragons. Leaving all you know behind, all for what? Adventure? But Tolk was like those folks. He loved the thrill of meeting new dragons and clans, but he did long for a chance to settle down, but he just never found the right reason. After his time in Shadow Clan, the Kodal was happy to wander the paths of Sorneath until he found somewhere else to settle down for a while. Perhaps he'd head back to his birthflight of Plague. But first, he decided a pass through Earth was needed. He loved all the open areas of the Earthshaker's domain, but it was a bit too dusty for his tastes to stay more than a day or two. So as he wandered under the open skies, the Kodal spotted something rather odd moving amongst the rocks. If he didn't know better, he would have mistook it for some snake, but the confused and hungry chirps and squeaks said otherwise. He had heard some clans led by mere wildclaws would sometimes leave weak hatchlings to die, but those were only rumors. Tolk never got the mentality. Seemed far too unfair, but perhaps that was just a plague mindset of survival of the group kicking it in. But Tolk would be a follower of Shade before he left a hatchling to the elements, and beast clans without them getting fair shot at life. Approaching carefully, he was surprised to find a Skydancer hatchling, and the reason he was left became apparent. All along the fragile thing's side was many brown eyes. Well, ain't this a darn travesty? A gift from the Earthshaker himself, and they're gone and squandered it. Don't you worry, little feller. I'll get you somewhere your gifts will be appreciated. After feeding and carefully placing the hatchling in one of the bags with clothing in it, the Kodal carried on his way, having just the clan in mind to take his new traveling partner to. He had heard of a rather weird plague clan that bordered of plague and shadow, the celebrated mutations like Little Feller in the Bags had. Seemed like decent folk, but it would take a while to get there. He was on the opposite side of the wastelands from where he needed to be. Well, little guy, looks like we're gonna be partners for a while. Hope you'll like where you're going. The hatchling just cooed at him in big eyes. Laughing, Tolk couldn't help but be a tad endeared to the Skydancer and had already become attached. Well, let's get a move on. We're burning daylight. As he trudged off for once, Tolk considered he might have just found the reason he needed to settle down. A son. What an adventure this would be. Aw, love that. I love this one. This one's wholesome. I love it. Finding a little Skydancer. I still be mindful. I'm still understanding half the stories, but I'm loving this so far. And I can't wait to see how many more stories that Claire decides to come out with. but she has many more on the way, and I'm pretty excited to see them all. So that, ladies and gentlemen, was called The Found Family. A good little mini story, I'd say. But without further ado, I say we move over to the next story, shall we? The next one is also by Claire DeMarcy, and this one is called Check. Bal had a love of games. Cards, board games, playground games, it didn't matter. He loved them. But all of the games, he had a distinct fondness for chess. He enjoyed the mind game and the strategy behind a good game of chess, and the competitiveness of it. And Bal was very competitive. So it was no wonder that when he began to think of hunting his prey like a game of chess, this time it was greedy noble that was his opponent. Opening move, black pawn to a3. He smirked internally, pretending to kiss up to his target. My lord, your genius and business sense are something to be admired. Those lands will yield you many rich resources. If those lands happen to be lived on by peasantry of the kingdom, well, that wasn't Bal's problem, now was it? From there, it was painfully easy to stir up dissent among the commoners, and whispers of rebellion sprang up. Division move. Black Knight takes White Bishop. Bal was methodically in his hunt, and when perhaps a dangerous nuisance popped up, like the local preacher with his pleads to and sway over the people, convincing them violence wasn't the way. Shame it was easy to plant evidence and get the noble to order his execution. Bal didn't appreciate when pieces didn't get in line. The new preacher was much easier to play, eager to gain status. Checkmate. Bal smirked, watching civil war erupt in the kingdom as he calmly sipped his tea. The screams were the most beautiful sound he had ever heard, and he couldn't help but hum along. He casually moved his queen to put the opposing king in check. Satisfied with his work, he turned to nearly dead noble. Good game, my dear fellow, but I'm afraid I got you in check. That means this is... Bal stalked closely until he towered over the fool he had tricked. Game, set, match. And the malice brought his claws down on his helpless prey. And they knew no more. Ooh. That was a good story. Very devious and conniving. Some of these would definitely make some good game stories, that's for sure. But I love these little short stories and reading them out. Haven't been doing this for a long time, and it feels good to get back to this again. Also, I like how he goes along the way to make it look like and sound like he's playing a game of chess. You know, making sure, deceiving everybody, planting evidence to make the nobles look like fools. Nothing this humble crusader probably wouldn't do. I mean, what? But yes, this was a good little story. Thank you again, Claire DeMarcy, for this one as well. And we have one more short story for this day of our Crusader reading day. And we'll move on to the last one. The Dragon's Claw. Once the land where the clans of Milady's Edge resided was alive with plants and animals, with soil for ground instead of flesh, and sky that wasn't colored a sickly green but clear blue. Those days have long since passed, and logically the residents of this long-forgotten landscape were as well. This was far from the truth of the matter, however, as situated in the ravine that makes up the clan's lair deep beneath the earth, the last of the former residents slumbered, or at least what became of them did. You see, the former clan that lived in the location many thousands of years before current times was a powerful kingdom, ruled by a warmonger of a king. They may have flourished economically and military-wise, but when it came to social happiness, the kingdom was impoverished, and her ruler a tyrant. So it was no surprise many citizens died from cruelty of the king and his men, and many more were far from satisfied with their leadership. And over the time, the dissent among the masses grew, boiling beneath the surface. A rebellion was inevitable, and civil war erupted, bloody and tragic in equal measures. The king proved his true colors to be that of a monster beyond what many had thought possible, taking no prisoners and sparing none, be they hatchling or adults, and the rebels who had learned from tyrants' tutelage were equally cruel in turn. This war, this brutal and horrific war of attrition, dragged on for many years, the land slowly being absorbed into the wandering contagion of the Plague-Bringer's domain. It ate at the foundations of the buildings, caring not for whose side they belonged, and at last the war ground to a halt. Both sides fled in fear of the blighted earth, and in their haste left the corpses of the fallen to the creeping rot, and on one of the many battlefields lay the corpses of 11 mighty Imperials. From the loyalists lay Zeus with scales of brightest blue marred by scars like lightning, Hera, a white and gold dragoness as beautiful as she was vengeful, Poseidon, who could make the earth shake with each mighty step and unforgiving as the sea, Aphrodite, known for her charms and beauty only being matched by her cruelty, and finally Ares, who is violent and bloodthirsty, caring not to differentiate friend from foe. And from the rebels, Morgan, a sorceress of great power that twisted the tides of battle, Tartarus, whose wings beat were said to send storms raging across the battlefields, Cernunnos, who would make the very landscapes rise up in defense those around him, Iryu, a dragoness who treated the fallen and was a symbol for what the rebellion fought for, and Bridget, a dragoness who raised morale and bolstered her allies with only her presence on the field of battle. And from neither side lay Prometheus, a traveler caught in the ceasefire. He fell in a senseless war, and as he lay bleeding and watching the infection creep towards him in the fallen, he wished he had a chance to create a warning for those who would reside here in the future, so that they would not meet the same fate, not be divided, but stand united. And then he closed his eyes, the final time as the rotting earth collapsed beneath the combined dead weight, sending the lost plummeting into the depths. The land eventually sealed itself, and the events of what happened faded from memory, and deep, deep below the creeping contagion worked. All the while a new clan took over the lands and held a strife-riddled history and began to dig the work of the diseased landscape, making itself known when they made it deep enough. Sickly torchlight poured into the natural cave, and Prometheus opened his eyes once more. Joined by the fallen warriors, all trapped within the same grotesque body, it was no wonder they screamed upon awakening. Prometheus got his wish, but not in a way he could have ever fathomed or wanted. And that is the last story of today's Crusader Reading Days. Of course, like I said, this is the first time we're doing this, and I appreciate the help of Claire DeMarcy for providing the first 3 stories to get this little idea started. I'm very excited to see how it goes, and I'm very excited to see what you guys come up for suggestions. If you have suggestions you'd like me to check out and read out for everybody, I would love to do so. I am very intrigued to see how some of these stories are and see what people have to write. See where things go. And of course, this last one, whew, that's a bit of a brutal way to go out, and I appreciate the idea of kind of turning all the gods into different forms of dragons, in a sense. Although then again, I may be corrected if I'm actually wrong on this. Please forgive me for that. But at the same time, it's still very cool. Kinda sad. As I can always see, Prometheus always gets the worst end, doesn't he? But that is for, well, that is for the eye to see, I suppose. Where's your Crusaders when you need them, I say? Send in the warriors to take down these divergent enemies. But alas, my fair Crusaders, that is all the stories we have for today. A bit of a short video, of course, but at the same time, something I'm more intrigued to try and get into. So if you all have some ideas, as I said, please feel free to leave them down in the comments below. Join our Discord, it is down in the description in the chat. Please feel free to leave a like and subscribe, of course, if you want to join us on our more reading adventures, or of course on many more adventures to come in other games that we'll be doing as well. And of course, my dear Crusaders, I bid you all a very, very fond farewell, be kind, And of course, good health.